Welcome in, everybody. It is the Daily Destroyer DFS show, part of the Dynasty Warzone Network. I'm your co-host at FF Tyler O, as always with my man at Blue Dog Sherman. Blue, how you doing, man?
Good. Happy New Year. We're in 2022 officially, but still in the same NFL season. So got a couple weeks left. We get that extra week this year.
That's
So
right. That's right.
usually
Grinding
week
DFS a little
17.
more.
Yeah, now we're back to week 17's finals and in season long stuff. And then of course we have another week for DFS stuff before the wild week 18.
Yeah, man. Sorry about last week, folks. We did not have a show. Unfortunately, me and my family got the COVID. Doing okay. Things are in a good spot right now, but was not able to record last week's DFS show. But we are here making sure we get you that information before week 17. Again, if I have any bad calls, I can just also blame it on the COVID brain as well. So that's always a nice little out for myself. So let's without further ado, there's no recap, obviously, because we did not record. We are going to the quarterback position. As always, start things off. I think there's like one quarterback that we got to talk about. I think that's going to be the highest rostered or highest owned quarterback on the slate. Everyone's talking about him. Everyone's excited for him. It's Trey Lance. He is starting. He's also in a smash spot. Texans are a top 5 matchup in terms of quarterback points. So for 4,800, it seems like Lance is just the play. Lou, thoughts on Lance?
Yeah, I mean, the price is just so cheap, and there's not a lot of value on the slate, so it's going to be important for, every dollar counts. And at quarterback is usually when the discrepancy between the cheap guys and the expensive guys, it's a little more even than some of the other positions. So if you think of it as he's 3,200 less than Josh Allen, and I'm not saying he has the same ceiling as Josh Allen does, but last time when he started, he had 16 carries and 89 yards. So the likelihood
Just
that
give me the
he has
carries
a
at
floor,
4,800. Like if a quarterback's 4,800 and you're going to say he's going to have 16 carries, I don't even care if he throws the ball at all, and he's going to. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like 16 carries for $4,800 is a hell of a deal.
I mean, if you told me a running back was going to get 16 carries and 89 yards, then at 4,800, like that'd be decently in play as well.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, I think he's pretty safe to get you at least 10 carries and probably 4 or 5 points just from his legs. And the fact that they're facing the Texans, it might be a little easier for him to put together some passing yards and maybe a touchdown here, touchdown there or something. So the likelihood that he gets 15 to 20 points is enough. It's high enough to be pretty solidified as the guy to go to in cash. There are obviously like other quarterbacks that are more likely to get in the 30s and stuff, but for 4,800, it's too cheap to really pass it up, I think, in cash.
I think a decent pivot, I don't think I'm necessarily going there, though, is going to be Tyler Huntley, 5,600. He's trending towards starting against the Rams, as Lamar Jackson doesn't look like he's able to go. We saw him in Week 15. He played a full game, and he put up 35 DK points. So we talk about somebody who possibly does have a bit of a ceiling or can get 30-plus points. Well, we literally just saw Huntley do it 2 weeks before. So everyone's going to Trey Lance. Is there value in the pivot to Huntley at 56 if you're still trying to save at the position?
Yeah, I think he's definitely in play in tournaments. You could, if you have that extra 800 points. It does seem like he has a decent floor, and he's been passing pretty efficiently in the 3 games where he's had over 35 pass attempts. In each of those games, he had 70% completion rate. So it's not like he's a bad passer. And each of those games, he also has over 200 passing yards. So the fact that he also was adding the floor of running last week, like I'm not going to expect 35 points from him again, but I think he's pretty safe. And for 5,600, it seems like he's established himself to be pretty good for 5,600 quarterback. Like if this was a more established player, he probably would be $1,000 more expensive. So not the easiest matchup for him, and that's where I think Lance still I favor, because facing the Texans versus the Rams defense. But Huntley's at home. His pieces are a little more expensive to pair together. I think if I'm playing Huntley, I might want to stack him versus Lance. I don't think I would end up stacking him. So I think Lance, you're playing more for his rushing, and Huntley, you're playing for more of like the combo.
Makes sense. Let's go to the top here, Lou. Paying up at quarterback. Let's say Josh Allen 8K, Patrick Mahomes 78, Tom Brady 76. Arbitrary cutoff as always. Those are the top three guys this week. Any interest in paying up at quarterback? Is that something you're interested in doing? Do you like these three?
Yeah, I think in tournaments, like Josh Allen's in a pretty good spot, and
a pretty good spot. He's in a great spot, man. He's in a great spot playing the Falcons.
He's playing the Falcons, and what we've seen in Bills games is even if they run up the score, if they're up by a few touchdowns in this game, they'll keep passing the ball. And most of the touchdowns that they score in general go through Josh Allen, either through his legs or through the air. We've seen Singletary have decent games of late, but for me, like, they're getting to the point where this point in the season, if teams are trying to get specific like seeds in the playoffs, then this is the game that they try for. And then next week is the week that they take off and stuff. So I think they're going to go pretty all out in this game, and facing the Falcons, like, it's such a smash spot for Josh Allen.
The Bills just need to win. They need to win.
Yeah, they need to win, so they're not going to just stop halfway through the game if they're up big. Like, it's less likely that he's going to take the fourth quarter off. I guess what I'm saying is it's less likely he's going to take the fourth quarter off, because instead, if they already lock up a spot, they could take next week off or something like that. So I really like Josh Allen up top. This Kansas City Bengals game could get out of hand, but I could also see the Bengals trying to control the clock.
Establish the run the way they try to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mahomes is pretty much always in play in general. I'm all right with him. I don't know. I probably wouldn't play Brady this week just because, like, they can really slow that game down, and they don't necessarily have to pass the ball because they're probably just going to smash the Jets anyway. And then that other game, the Arizona-Dallas game, could see myself playing either side of the ball there. I expect Dak Prescott to be pretty highly owned and Kyler Murray to be less owned. Kyler just hasn't been
himself.
He hasn't been a 7,300 quarterback for much of the year, but he did have that big run last week, which really helped his score. But he's been fumbling the ball a lot this year, not always losing them, but it seems like he's getting a little reckless out there in a way, but hasn't been running the ball at the same amount as he had in past seasons. And that's where his ceiling really comes from, is when he gets touchdowns through his legs or, 50-plus yard rushing days. And he's had some of those, but he's not running as often. So it's a little more hit or miss. And he hasn't really been hitting the 300-yard bonus either. But I think this is the matchup against the Cowboys that this game could get really out of hand in high scoring. So I think based on the matchup and maybe because of what the last few weeks have been, maybe you can catch him on a little lower ownership. So I'm trying to build Kyler teams. It's just tough because they have so many pieces that you can pair him with. And if you get it wrong, then, that could really hurt you as well. So those are really the guys that I'm looking at least up top.
Is there any other guys that you want to mention before we get your pool of three quarterbacks and move to the running back position?
Stafford is all right. He's a little expensive for a guy that you're not really getting rushing from, and his ceiling hasn't really been that high this season. So, like, to me, he's $100 cheaper than Kyler, but we know Kyler has a higher ceiling. And Stafford hasn't had a 300-yard game in 5 weeks. So it's kind of been a while. They do have a pretty good matchup. The Ravens just give up as many passing yards as you want on them. But I'm struggling if I want to play him or not. And then Herbert was the other one.
Yep.
The problem with that Chargers Broncos game is that could be kind of a slog. And but what we know about Justin Herbert is he's just going to throw multiple touchdowns and probably 300 yards. So I'd have some interest there too. But it's kind of like you can play whoever you want at quarterback if you're not going to go like the dumpster diving of Lance and Hundley.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Yeah. Were there any other guys you were thinking about?
No, that does it for me. Herbert would have been probably the last one that I'd bring up. Thought about Jalen Hurts for a second, but I mean, the price is nice, but there's just other guys that I like. I'm more likely to play Dak Prescott, I believe, than Jalen Hurts, just the way the Eagles have been playing. It's a bit ugly, even though it's a good matchup. I don't know. I guess like if you like Jalen Hurts, if you had like a strong conviction for Jalen Hurts, I'd listen. Wouldn't tell you no, but pretty good there. Your pool of 3 quarterbacks, Lou.
I'll say Lance, Josh Allen, and Dak.
Running back position, I think there is some pretty decent chalk on this slate when it comes to the running back position. I just want to talk about these 3 at the top, likely going to have the highest ownership on this slate. That's going to be David Montgomery, 65, Ronald Jones, 63, and Sony Michel at 58. All in that 58 to 65 range. All 3 of these dudes should easily see 20 touches, and they're all priced relatively cheap. So we should see all these guys clear 20%. I wouldn't be surprised if each one of these running backs cleared 25% in terms of ownership. Break down these 3 for me. What are your thoughts, Lou?
Yeah, to me, if I were to rank them on like who's first into my lineup, basically, I would probably do Sony, Michel, and then Montgomery, and then Rojo.
Mm-hmm.
We just know with the Bucks, like depending on how that game flows, like Rojo could have 10 carries in that game. Like it's kind of sporadic what they do running the ball sometimes. Or, Keyshawn Vaughn gets a 50-yard touchdown, and then all of the Rojo teams you had misses out on that sort of yard and touchdown equity. But he's also more expensive this week, like 6,300. He doesn't have a huge role in the passing game, which it's kind of weird. He like used to, but David Montgomery has had a massive role in the passing game. He has 4 straight games lately, with at least 5 catches. And we know he gets all of the rush work, and they're facing the Giants, which is one of the easiest matchups you can have. So to me, I'd rather go to Montgomery than Rojo. And then Sony Michel's 5,800 and just completely mispriced.
Henderson's on IR. It's completely mispriced.
Henderson's gone. Michel's had, he's 24, 20, 18, 27 carries in the last 4 games. So he probably already took that role back from Henderson. So it almost doesn't matter if Henderson was playing or not. He should not be 5,800. I don't understand why. Going into last week, they brought his price down.
He should be like 68. It should be like 6,800 at the very least.
Yeah. He doesn't really have much pass work, so you're still playing off of hoping for touchdowns, 100 yards, but he's just got such a massive workload right now. For 5,800, he just seems like the lock for me of those running backs. So that's how I'd rank those 3.
That makes sense. Let's go with 3 other guys.
Sure.
In that same range, but cheaper. Daryl Williams at 5,800. He's 20 plus touches pretty easily without CH. CH has been ruled out. Michael Carter at 5,100. We saw him come back last week off of IR. I believe he had 19 touches, 16 carries, 3 targets. And then finally, Jarrett Patterson from the Washington football team. We know Gibson is out on the COVID list, and he seems to be the guy that is going to be getting the work there awfully cheap. So between those three, also good saving spots. Three guys who are projected to see decent volume. Maybe not as much as the guys we talked about above, but pretty damn close. Daryl Williams, 58. Michael Carter, 51. And then Jarrett Patterson, I believe, 48. Thoughts on these three? I don't know if ancillary options is the best, but three guys that we have interest in.
Yeah, because this is a lot of that ownership is just going to go to Sony. It is important to look at these guys that are in that range or a little cheaper. I think Michael Carter probably is my favorite of those guys, just because he has the type of role in a game that we expect the Bucks to pretty much just run away with it. It's the type of game script that is likelier to get in Michael Carter into his passing game work, and we've seen it in the past with him. Like it's pretty crazy some of his spike weeks in targets, but he didn't really get too many targets last week. But he did have 16 carries and over 100 yards. So to me, it's like why were they even giving Tevin Coleman any sort of workload? Just try out your young guy. You guys aren't winning too many games this year, and just get him those reps. And we've seen it in the past. He had that one stretch where he had 9 and 14 targets in back-to-back games. So if this is the type of thing where they're trailing, or even just if it's competitive for a while too, and he's in there, then 5,100 is a pretty good price. Jarrett Patterson, the problem with him is we just don't really know much about him. But from what we've seen, he doesn't really catch passes. And that's really what playing a Washington running back is kind of all about. Like when Gibson was there without McKissick, Gibson would get all of the pass work as well as the rushing. But assume that Patterson is going to get a decent amount of work, like red zone type work. But the question is, like, how many points are going to be scored in this game? They've, in their last 5 weeks, they're the most points they've had is 20. Like they just get 17 points every week. So if there's only 2 touchdowns in this game, like the upside isn't super high on him because he's not going to catch passes. And if Carter gets 3-4 catches, that is even with the Patterson touchdown. So I'd probably say Carter's my favorite of the bunch there.
Gotcha. We talked about some cheap guys. I mean, it's easy to just not pay up at running back this week. But let's say we are going to pay up. Let's again, arbitrary cutoff. Jonathan Taylor, rightly so, 9K. Eckler, 82. Alvin Kamara, 79. And let's say Joe Mixon, 75. Your thoughts on these 4 higher priced running backs? Are any of them in that lineup for you? Your favorites, your least?
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor just seems like he's in good matchups every week, and they keep feeding him the rock. I don't know if they're trying to get him MVP. Like what we've known in the past is you kind of have to be a quarterback, I feel like, to get MVP. But yeah, I mean, just he's on another stretch of 3 games over 100 yards, and we know if they get a lead, they're just gonna get him 25, 30 carries in this game. And to me, it's pretty difficult to fit a lineup with Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp, both the expensive guys. So you kind of got to pick one or the other. But I do like Jonathan Taylor in general. 9K is a lot for a running back, but he's the type of guy who you're paying up, but I feel like you're more confident in him than someone like Eckler's 8,200 and just doesn't get as many touches. And I don't know, guys coming off of COVID seem to they haven't really been coming back and having just monster games, and 8,200 is a lot to swallow in that one.
We know he's not well too. I mean,
yeah.
I think he went on like a live stream and talked about how he was not feeling good. I mean, it was on that live stream where he said play Justin Jackson, absolute smash. Thanks for that one, Eckler. But you're right.
Yeah, it worked last week.
Yeah, but he feels like shit. He felt like shit. So I'm kind of with you on that. It's a tough play at 82.
So I think the other one of the upper guys that plays is Joe Mixon. We know he's going to get his touches. He gets targets. He's the guy that they try to get touchdowns with. And like I said earlier, like I wouldn't be surprised if that's the Bengals' game plan is to try to run the ball a bunch and slow it down a little bit. And people remember last week with Joe Burrow 500 passing yards that I think they're going to go back to that because they're
Why
facing the
not?
Chiefs, and there's a lot of great options you could have there. So I kind of like Joe Mixon in tournaments.
Any other running backs you want to touch on before we go to wide receiver?
Yeah, the other one I like Damian Harris this week.
Okay.
Great matchup against the Jaguars. Back-to-back games over 100 yards. He gets touchdowns for them, and they're gonna pretty much control that game anyway. And he's right next to Montgomery and Ronald Jones, so he's gonna have less ownership than those two. So I like Harris. You're really playing him. You're hoping he gets the 100 yards and touchdown. If he doesn't, he probably ends up being a fail. But I think it's worth it on the leverage of those more chalky guys.
Pool of 5 running backs, Lou.
I'll go with Taylor, Mixon, Michelle, Montgomery, and Carter.
Taylor, Mixon, Montgomery, Michelle, and Carter. All right, wide receivers. Let's start things off here talking about the Buccaneers. We know Godwin is out with an ACL injury. Antonio Brown at 6,100. If he does play, I expect him to be the highest, like one of the, if not the highest, rostered wide receivers. But let's also talk about Evans at 71. It looks like, or 7,000. It looks like Evans is going to play. So Evans at 7K and a possible AB at 6,100. Thoughts on these Tampa Bay wide receivers who I expect to be a popular play one way or another. One of these dudes is probably going to have at least 25% ownership is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think Antonio Brown's probably going to be in cash. Like, I feel like he's a lock if he's noticeably healthy. There's some reports about potential ankle injury, ankle soreness. And so to me, like, I think in tournaments, it's very fair to just switch off of him and try to get to Evans. And it's the type of thing where Antonio Brown has just been getting massive target shares when he's been out there last few weeks. And so I think I'd play him in cash, assuming he's healthy. But in tournaments, I'd be off of him to go to Evans, who we know Evans has the upside, and he's getting close to 1,000-yard season again. And we know his stretch of 1,000-yard seasons, and Brady wants that. And then Antonio Brown has different narratives on his yardage totals on the season. So it's the type of thing where this is the game where they could just go for the records now and then not play next week.
Mm-hmm.
That's the funny part about like 17 versus 18 weeks. Maybe they say, oh, Mike Evans, like you need 101 yards to have 1,000 on the season, but it's like, well, what if we do this in 16 games, through 17 weeks, and then you don't have like an asterisk or something? But I don't know. That's very narrative based, but when it comes to the matchup, like it's very easy to see Evans coming out of this game with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Cooper Kupp, 9,500. He's been on fire. He's playing the Ravens, who are getting absolutely torched through the air. I mean, it's not totally their fault. They're mangled on defense, but we just saw Burrow go absolutely ape shit with multiple wide receivers. Pretty much, I wouldn't say blowing up. At least T. Higgins blew up. The other ones were great. So I mean, it just seems like a smash spot. We were talking about chasing records. I mean, it's Kupp. So I mean, I really want to dig a little bit deeper down to Cooper Kupp here. Like, is this something that's really in play for you?
Yeah, I think I'd like to get to Cooper Kupp. We've just seen this Ravens defense get absolutely demolished in previous weeks, and it's just like they're gonna throw Kupp the ball whenever they want to, and he's probably gonna catch it whenever they want to. So to me, it's the type of thing where if you can find the money for it, like I'm probably going to him if I'm paying up at wide receiver, 9,500, but he's just like guaranteed 8+ catches and probably a touchdown. Like he has, he gets 96 yards every game. It's like he's just putting up numbers that It's a special season for him.
The breakfast narrative is strong.
I think his stat was it 96? Might have been 95. He's got like 12 straight games with at least 95 yards. He only has one game on the season less than 90 yards. And
Jesus.
so it's just he's just putting up it's like that Michael Thomas year a few years back where yes, his price keeps going up, but he's also like the safest play, and 9,500
reflects that ceiling and floor.
Yeah, and this is like that's where you kind of have to choose between Taylor or Cup, and it just seems like wide receiver that has that crazy floor is a little safer because he's
catching balls
10 catches for 80 yards versus just an 80-yard game for Jonathan Taylor. That's the difference of 10 points. So that's where I think I probably end up leaning Cup in that sense.
Two other wide receivers that I've interested in on this, I would say upper to higher upper end, is going to be Tyreek Hill. I think going back to Tyreek Hill, he was coming. I think he was coming off a COVID or an injury and didn't. He sat last week. I mean, he didn't have a bad week because he was on the field. He just wasn't on the field. I mean, Pringle blew up. I mean, they could have easily been Tyreek. So Tyreek at 83, I think, is interesting to go back to. And then AJ Brown, who saw over a 50% target share last week. At 72 are two dudes I have interest in. Your thoughts on Hill and AJ Brown?
Yeah, I think hopefully that Hill ownership is somewhat down. The problem is like if you're going to play that game stack, you're probably going to play Tyreek Hill. So I could see it being still above 10%.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I mean, we know what his upside is, and you're playing him hoping for his upside. You're not playing him for the case where he sits half the game. So AJ Brown just like is that guy for the Titans, and 16 targets in his first game back. So it seems like he's back to healthy. Miami's defense has been somewhat good, but
there's nowhere else to go with the ball, man.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. The thing is, like, the Titans don't throw the ball like a ton and get a ton of passing yards, but when they do, it's going to AJ Brown. Like, they basically have no tight ends. They basically have no other wide receivers that they throw the ball to. So I like AJ Brown at that price, 7,200. Like, the guys above him, like, I'd rather play him over Keenan Allen, but I still think I would lean CD over AJ Brown.
Okay.
It's a great matchup against the Cardinals, as we mentioned before. I'm expecting this game to be somewhat out of hand, high scoring. And we've seen the spike weeks for CD Lamb.
Is this a stack with Dak situation where you go Dak and CD Lamb?
Yeah, I think he's the one that I'd prefer. Amari did a little.
What about Gallup, man? 4,800 for Gallup, but he has the largest ADOT on the team. I mean, is there a three-way stack there going where you go Lamb, Gallup, and Dak, or is it really just CD that you're interested in? Is there a third piece you'd want to play?
There's not a ton of value, as you mentioned, on this slate, but Gallup is one of those, at least from wide receiver, the under 5K guys. So I like Gallup. It's so tough with the Cowboys. They have so many different options, but we're pretty sure that Zeke isn't really one of those options anymore. So, yeah, I like Gallup for that price, especially.
Cortland Sutton, another guy I expect a lot of conversation going around right now. 4,500. We know Judy is out. COVID. We know Tim Patrick is out. COVID. So at this point in time, it really, like, as far as starters go at the wide receiver position, it's just Cortland Sutton. Keep seeing news that he might be put on COVID. Like, I don't know if, like, as if right now on Saturday he's not on the list, but they keep saying he might be put on the list. But something to keep an eye out for. Your thoughts on Sutton at 4,500 as the last starting wide receiver remaining?
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure he traveled with the team. So as of now, I expect him to play, and he's kind of the only guy there, because if he's not playing, it's just a bunch of practice squad guys who we've like never heard of before. So he's going to be basically the alpha. It's
Well, we've
just,
heard of Kendall
do you
Hinton.
trust Drew Lock? Yeah, they got a quarterback there now for wide receiver, but in Seth Williams, I think, who's like a rookie who hasn't played all year.
Auburn. I mean,
So
there's a lot of hype for that guy in the offseason. Hasn't really turned into anything.
yeah, so Cortland Sutton at 4,500 is just that price alone it really stuck out to me. But you're betting on Drew Lock actually having a decent enough game to like pass him the ball, and what we know is someone we didn't talk about at running back. Like the way you generally beat the Chargers is running the ball. Like this could just end up being a Javonte week.
Yeah, I mean, or Melvin Gordon week. You never know. That's the issue, right?
Right. So they might just run the ball a bunch, but I think if they're going to pass it, like Sutton's going to be the guy who's going to catch a lot of that work.
All right. Other wide receivers, just kind of go through the list of guys I have interest in. Braxton Barrios, 3,700. He's actually been pretty solid. If you look at his DK points, I mean, he's cleared 10 points the last 3 weeks, and now there's no Crowder and Elijah Moore at this point. So obviously no Corey Davis. We know he can eat it up underneath. It seems like a pure, I don't know if it's a punt play because we're pretty confident that like he can get 10 points. But he has produced and had decent volume games this year. Like the ceiling's not there, but at 3,700, we're only looking for 10 points. 16 points is well within reach and would be an absolute smash at this price. Barrios as a somewhat cheaper play, 37 thoughts.
Yeah, the problem with Barrios is he's scoring all these touchdowns not from receiving, and so his points are a little higher than maybe they should. Like if you're like watching the game, like he's not getting them from his 5 receptions. So for me, like I think he's fine for cash, but I don't necessarily think I'd be playing him in tournaments because I think there's going to be a lot of ownership there, and I'm not trying to chase like high owned cheap guys. So the guy that I like off of that more chalky play is Zay Jones, who has been surprisingly getting a lot of work. And if you don't watch Raiders games, then you might not even know. But he has 3 straight games of 5 catches, and it seems like he's filling into that Henry Ruggs role. And we know Zay Jones can be a deep threat as well. And they're facing the Colts, but they're going to be indoors for this game. So I kind of like Zay Jones off of Barrios just because Barrios is that type of guy who he gets a lot of short routes and his upside just isn't as high as someone like Zay Jones, who we've seen it before, who gets like 40-yard touchdowns here and there. So to me, I prefer Zay.
I like the call. The targets have been there, particularly with some exited targets in terms of Waller and Ruggs. So like the call. Looking at the wide receiver list here, I think we've talked about Brandon Cooks. I think we talk about safe guys similar to Barrios. At 6K, Davis Mills has been more than serviceable, I would say, at this point in time. And I don't know, Cooks is just like a pretty safe play at this point with that price. I mean, we also know the ceiling is there with a long touchdown. We've seen those multiple times year for year. So your thought, Cooks 6K?
Yeah, I think like any given week, I can't tell someone to not play Cooks. He's basically exactly that price every week, and he's pretty much putting up 16 to 20 points every given week too. So he's the guy who, if that game were to get a lot of scoring in it, he would definitely be a part of it. He's been very solid all year. Pretty much the most consistent Texan. If you're going to play any Texans, like he's the one to do it on. Back-to-back games with 100 yards. He was a guy who I was trying to play him last week against the Jags. And he had 100 yards, 2 touchdowns last week. The problem is they don't get a ton of touchdowns, so you're trying to get there on volume and
This hasn't been bad. It hasn't been bad.
Yeah, he's pretty safe to get at least like 6 catches, and we know he has the deep threat ability as well. So I think Cooks is fine. Like I'm not rushing to get him, but like I said to you before we started the stream here, is if I'm in that range and looking for someone to fill out my lineup, like I have I have no problem putting Cooks in.
Any other wide receivers you'd like to talk about here, Lou?
I like the other guys on the Rams. So I think a reason why I'm going to end up playing Stafford is so many people are going to want to play Sony Michel. Then it's just simple to play a passing game instead. What do you think between Odell and Jefferson? Who you'd prefer? Because they're similarly priced. Odell's 57 and Van Jefferson is 53. Right now, I think I probably lean Odell. Like, depends if you need the 400 or not. But Odell seems like he's becoming a guy that Stafford likes to throw to near the end zone.
Yeah, I was about to say
I
the
think
touchdowns are there for
touchdown
OBJ.
equity is higher.
Even though Van Jefferson does have those long runs, I mean, he could break
Right.
out a 70, 50-yard touchdown as well.
Right, and that's the way that you beat the Ravens right now.
I don't know. My guts tell me Van Jefferson, but I think it's smarter to play Odell. But I think I would go Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson in tournaments. I think I would lean because it's like Odell's getting touchdowns, but it's like still like his points aren't necessarily his ceiling. I don't think is as high. So I think I would honestly lean in tournaments, stacking the Cooper Kupp with Van Jefferson and Stafford if I was going that route.
Yeah, and then I'd probably bring it back with Marquise Brown. Actually, like he hasn't been like getting too many crazy points because Mark Andrews is getting like all the stats there, but he's putting up so many targets, and even with Huntley there, like he's getting a ton of targets. And
yeah, quarterback proof.
Yeah, I mean,
him and Andrews, man.
But he has 8 straight games with 5 catches, at least 5. He just hasn't been getting the yardage amounts, so I just feel like he's sort of due. One of these weeks, he's going to break off a big play, or just in general start catching more like 20-yard balls. It does seem weird that he's getting a lot of these targets and only coming out of it with like 45, 50 yards. So I kind of like Marquise Brown, who's also in that range with like the Cooks and Odell Beckham. What do you think about him?
I don't know. I feel like, I'm on the fence. I mean, I'm not no strong conviction one way or another. Any other quarterbacks before we go to your 5-player wide receiver pool, Lou?
No, I think like Christian Kirk might get chalky in that game. But yeah, that's basically it for wide receivers.
All right. Going to the tight end position. It's a little bit tricky here, in my opinion. I don't really find myself really pulling to any of the higher priced tight ends here with Andrews at 74, Kelsey 73, or Kittle at 71. Let's just, for the sake of sakes, loop Gronk into there. Those 4 highest priced tight ends. Is there interest there for you, Lou, or are you just going cheaper?
I'm not really interested in paying up a tight end just because in these weeks where there's not a ton of value, usually I'll go to tight end to just get that value, because for $7K paying for a tight end, like I would rather pay for someone like CeeDee Lamb at that rate. Even though like Mark Andrews has been putting up crazy stats the last few weeks, but I feel like that's gonna run out at some point. 7,400 like hard to swallow, but I also think that means his ownership is going to be very low. So you probably go there, but out of those guys, I'd probably just pick Kelsey. And I don't know if I'm going to do it in general anyway, but it seems like he's finally back after that last game he had. And Kittle is just so up and down. Like it's hard for me to pay
to pick the right
7,100 for him. So I'm trying to go down.
All right.
A couple of guys in the mid-range that I'd consider is Goddard and maybe Zach Ertz. But I'm trying to go low. There's CJ Uzomah, 3,300. He's been getting a lot of targets as of late. Like that's a game that could be high scoring in general. And for 3,300, like if he just comes out of that with a touchdown, you're probably fine. And then Steven Anderson's the bare minimum.
I was just about to mention he's stone min, but he's a starter, man, and he has been involved a little bit this season. Like it hasn't been he hasn't been a starter. Clearly the third guy there in some instances, but he has been used. I think he has a touchdown or 2 on the season, so it's good to know that there is some familiarity out there as a player on the field during real games. So, I mean, 2,500 seems like a real punt. I'm just not sure I need to do that. I think I have the money to get to Uzoma at 33, or I have interest in Foster Moreau at 38. The targets are there. So, obviously, I wouldn't play Foster Moreau and Zay Jones, but if I didn't play Zay, I would be looking at Foster Moreau. I still am a Foster Moreau fan.
Yeah, I think he's fine. I don't know. It's just like seems like he hasn't been a plug and play Waller, so I'm just concerned about the upside. But I mean, if you're in that range, like he's a lot better than like others. But I think I'd prefer Higbee, specifically in that range. You think we got Higbee? Like he's 4K, and
yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think it's weird because like I view like a distance between Moreau at 38 and Fant at 44, right? I feel like the 600 savings is worth mentioning, but you go to like 4K with Higbee, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, might as well go to Fant at 44. But I don't have that same kind of gut check with Moreau.
That
really
like 3 in front.
Yeah, it really just comes down to what fits, I guess.
Yeah.
Any other tight ends you'd like to play, Lou?
No, I think that's basically it. Like, you could do the dart at Albert O, but at that point, I feel like I would just go to Steven Anderson, or like Uzoma. It just seems like with Fant in, like I'd either just do Fant or neither. And the Chargers haven't been great against tight ends in general, and we know that Drew Lock does favor Fant like in the past. So,
so if Sutton doesn't go, Sutton doesn't go, Fant at 44 becomes that becomes a real interesting. I mean, if Sutton doesn't go, I think 44 Fant is. I don't know if I'll call it a lock, but he's in my lineups.
Yeah, he's definitely makes the pool in that scenario.
All right, pool of 3 tight ends.
It's just 3. I'm gonna do Anderson, Uzoma, and Goddard.
Close it off. Defense, special teams. I mean, again, it's what fits. End of the day, I think Seahawks. They're playing Tim Boyle and the Lions at 3,300 if you can get there, and also Bears playing the Giants 3,200. I don't know if it's Fromm or Glennon, but if you can get up to that, if you can get up to that mid range of it's kind of upper range to be honest, of Seahawks or Bears, I'm here for it. I think they're pretty great plays. If we're going to a cheaper option. I mean, Dolphins 2,800 playing Tennessee. We talked about AJ Brown kind of being their only weapon. If he could be pretty low scoring, I think the Dolphins have some interest there as well. And then we say this every week, but the Lions, if you need to punt at 24, I just don't expect there to be a lot of points scored in this Lions Seahawks game. Expected to be pretty, and like the Lions actually have been pretty solid in the sack department. And we know the Seahawks line has not been great. So I think if you really need a cheap option, I could swallow the Lions. Thoughts on defense, special teams?
Yeah, I think that's pretty decent like list there. Like there's not a ton of great teams under 3K, and then like if you're over 3K, like if you can get up to the Patriots, I think they're pretty solid spot. But the Bears are probably going to be super chalky, which means you can go a different route. Maybe like the Chargers are probably where I'd go off of the Bears, but it's kind of like what fits. But I think I'd rather try to pay over 3K this week for defense.
Yep. I think it makes a lot of sense. Final thoughts. Week 17, DFS, main slate, DraftKings.
No, yeah, I think when I was building lineups before, I wasn't really seeing a lot of late game guys in my lineups, and there's a massive slate. Like there's 14 game slate, and I think a lot of the good plays are in the early games. So maybe try to flex and try to find some of those in the later games, like the Dallas, Arizona, and that Denver, LA game are probably the two I'm going to try to get some pieces of. So, yeah, it should be a good week, and good luck to people that are in things like best ball finals or just their regular season long finals, because this is championship week for a lot of people.
It truly is. A lot of money will be paid out. So again, best of luck, folks. If you're not in there with your dynasty or redraft teams, hopefully the DFS streets are good to you. Again, you can follow Lou on Twitter at Lou Dog Sherman, myself at FF Tyler. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.